The 6th of March 2025. Welcome to what you are tuning into the news desk right here on television, where we inform, impact, and inspire you. Plenty on the go in this hour. Very fuzzy comments coming from President Cyril Ramaphosa, talking about the fact that he's very saddened about the Johannesburg deteriorating state as it prepares to host the G20 Summit, as if he hasn't seen any of the news headlines that have been happening, amongst also the Microsoft South Africa investment briefing that he was delivering lately, just talking about the fact that there is going to be some investment plans to train about 1 million South African citizens on all AI skills. On that, we dig dive on those stories as well. Julius Malema, not forgetting that he went into Parliament today into trying to find ways on how we can deal with Trump moving away some of his aid, especially that is coming into South Africa. The Parliament was sitting there, we're just trying to find out that is it global politics or is it some people playing cards here. And then later on in the point of view, I am going to be joined by Luyolo, it is rather Luyolo, who is from the Voices, amplifying the youth voices. She's going to be joining us. He's a youth activist there, as we try to shift focus onto student protests, right? We are seeing that student protests are still continuing even in 2025, knowing the fact that this is something that started off in 2015, where we saw fees must fall coming into the rise, but we are seeing those student protests even happening even in 2025. The recent one that we are seeing in the University of Cape Town, as well as the University of University veterans that we are seeing there. We are going to be discussing that with Luyolo right, there we go, I got it right. But I am asking you a question this evening. What I want to find out from you definitely is the fact that, are student protests an effective tool for change, or do they highlight deeper failures in leadership? You can share your views and comments as we get into that conversation in the point of view. Plenty for us to discuss even on today's show. Not forgetting as well that we are going to be looking ahead of the budget speech that is going to be discussed, tabled rather, by the Minister of Finance, Godongwana, in next week, which is the 12th of March, Wednesday, the 12th of March. So we have been anticipating that. All right, plenty on the go. Buckle up, because this is the Thursday edition of the News Desk. Very good evening to you indeed. I am Kagiso Sotole, reporting live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Right, we begin this evening on this story. President Cyril Ramaphosa has definitely taken out some expressions around the disappointing poor state of the city of Johannesburg. This comes after his visit, as he voiced out his concern over the deteriorating state of Johannesburg while hosting a high-profile G20 meetings. The city, which was set to welcome leaders for main G20 Summit later this year, is under spotlight. And one thing that I was asking myself is that, didn't President Cyril Ramaphosa see this deteriorating place? I mean, there has been news report that has been happening across Johannesburg, a lot of crime that we are seeing around the city of Johannesburg. And now that we are seeing the fact that he is coming out, as he was visiting, as he has been visiting other provinces with the COGTA minister Zwelithini, who were there from the IFP, as we know that they are in the government of national unity. There we are seeing that they are visiting the cities there. As they were visiting those cities, he said some remarks, in a sense that he was saddened by how Johannesburg was recently looking. And I wonder what are your thoughts around it, visit because of, as he was visiting there, the Premier Panyaza Lesufi, as well as other cabinet ministers, were there to welcome him at Braamfontein, where they were sitting. During a visit in the Johannesburg City Council in Braamfontein, Ramaphosa, alongside Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi and Johannesburg Mayor Dada Morero, said it was unpleasant to welcome global dignitaries to a city battling malfunctioning traffic lights, infrastructure collapsing, and unkept in cleaner cities, right? And we are seeing that it has been deteriorating. Johannesburg has been that city that has been deteriorating, and it has been not been kept clean. And looking at it, that it has been titled as the African Economic Hub. Is it still that economic African hub, or is it still failing? And that is what is happening according to reports that we are seeing there, especially the fact that the president was definitely looking at some of the facts and some of the ways that we are seeing how can we revitalize Johannesburg as a city to make sure that it hosts the global citizens there. There is a report by Alpha Raulshwana, who is an EWN reporter who was reporting on the story, and this is what he had to say.
And they've got more power than President Ramaphosa. He's saying power, and I've been telling South Africans that for years. And they've got more power than President Ramaphosa. They cancel everything he says. They've got more power than the ministers. For example, you have a...
Right, that is an incorrect sound bite there, but definitely trying to get that sound for you, where we're looking at the fact that Alpha Raulshwana was reporting on the story, definitely that was there at the scene there. I think this is the report.
Johannesburg specifically chosen to host the Leaders Summit later this year. International delegates have been in the city in recent weeks for ministerial gatherings of G20 member states. President Cyril Ramaphosa says it has been unpleasant to welcome international dignitaries to Johannesburg.
One or two meetings of the G20 that I attended here was not very pleasing. The environment that one observed was not a pleasing environment. I say this so that we can improve immensely.
G20 attendees have experienced Johannesburg's ruthless traffic caused by malfunctioning traffic lights at major intersections. The inner city has also come under scrutiny as it remains in disarray despite efforts to revitalize it. Alpha Raulshwana, Eyewitness News, Johannesburg.
Alpha Raulshwana, the EWN reporter, reporting on the story. But what the big question is, who do we blame at this case? Who do we blame for the city of Johannesburg for the state that is in right now? Are we blaming the premier? Are we blaming the mayor? Are we blaming the national leaders? Because, I mean, as the president, you should be intact and include with the cities that govern the country that you are running. But in this case, we are seeing that President Cyril Ramaphosa was not in a state of pretentious. I'm not sure that is or rather he acting in a sense that he wasn't aware of the state of Johannesburg, how it looks. And these are some of the issues that could have been addressed before the G20 coming up. And some might be looking at the fact that we are looking at this, that remember when 2020 World Cup came, remember how we revitalized our streets, how we revitalized some of our infrastructure to make sure that we welcome dignitaries in our country. But now the dying factor is that we are seeing history repeating itself at the same time, that President Cyril Ramaphosa will be focusing on re-establishing and revitalizing the city of Johannesburg only for the G20 meetings. If only, the question is, if only it wasn't for the G20 meetings, would have we been seeing this revitalization happening? Would we have been seeing this revitalization, this engagement that he has been doing with the city of Johannesburg? Because the city has changed mayors multiple times and service delivery remains a huge issue. Is this a reflection of governance and instability? That's another thing. That's why the copter minister was also there to kind of also try to find a way that how even as COGTA, as the department, are they going to move forward in making sure that everything runs smoothly ahead of the G20 summit? What does South Africa mean? What does this mean rather for South Africa's international reputation, especially as it prepares to host this big economic summits that it hosts, looking as that this G20 summit is coming up a little bit later on in the year right here in South Africa. But most importantly, I want to hear what are your comments ahead of this session that we are having here. Join us in the conversation. What do you think needs to change in Johannesburg leadership? Is it investment? Is it accountability? What is it? Is it the leadership? However you view it, make sure that you go onto our social media platforms and use the hashtag NewsDesk, and you can find us on at Television 360 on all our social media platforms. All right, that is the first story that we are tracking for you. Moving along from President Cyril Ramaphosa addressing the fact that we need to make sure that we don't regret to make Johannesburg the host of the G20 summit, which is some of his remarks as he was addressing the council there in the Johannesburg City Council there, where some of the mayors and also some of, rather not the mayors, the cabinet ministers, as well as the MECs and also the premier and also the MEC of, the minister of COGTA, they were there together. Moving along to another story that has been making waves, especially when it comes to our country, has to be that as you know that President Trump has cut aid from South Africa. We know that Julius Malema was one of the dignitaries who was voicing out some of his remarks in terms of what President Trump has declared as the country that is not dealing with certain things fairly, especially when it comes to the Land Expropriation Act that we saw. And he made remarks in saying that, South Africa is dealing with some unlawful things that have been happening a lot. And that is what we are seeing that is happening there. And we are definitely looking into some of those features and some of those remarks that we are seeing there. And definitely, Julius Malema, EFF leader, has come out swaying against the United States after it cut in aid to South Africa. The US says that it has lost part of its global policy changes, but Malema claims its direct punishment to South Africa's instance on Palestine and case fled against the Israel and International Court of Justice, which is some of these remarks that we are seeing. In fact, that we know that President Trump has cut a lot of aid in South Africa, coming out of some of the remarks. And President, the leader of the EFF, Julius Malema, came out to say that, straightening out some remarks to saying the fact that this remarks has been declared based on the fact that South Africa stood stance against the Palestinians. And that is what we are seeing. The fact that we remember that we saw Ronald Lamola, the minister, they're going out into the international court there, stating out some of the facts on how this conflict has been happening in both sides of the nations there. I'm trying to find some of the proceedings that were happening today in Parliament, as Malema was urging that the US is using economic pressures to force South Africa into silence. And that is what we are seeing, that they are using some of these political terms, and not only forgetting that the past weekend we saw him going against the Ukraine President Zelensky there, as they were going into an altercation at the White House. But we are seeing that even this afternoon there has been reports that the US has also withdrawn from South Africa's Just Energy program, cutting $1 billion in potential commercial investments. That means that our global climate change fundings as well are going to be cut. And what does this mean for South Africa, and what does it mean for global change in Africa as a whole, as you know that it is the global hub there as well? And the leader of the EFF, Julius Malema, was there today as stating some of these things. Here is some of his remarks.
Amazon, Facebook, Google, Tesla, Starlink and Silicon Valley, the global hub of data collection, cannot claim to be misinformed. They are the greatest perpetrators of disinformation. The USA is the greatest perpetrator of disinformation. It is now using its own falsehood as justification to attack South Africa. This government refused to acknowledge the real issues. We are being punished for supporting Palestine against apartheid Israel, nothing else. The USA does not believe there is a white genocide or land grabs in South Africa.
He even got a round of applause there. That is the EFF leader, Julius Malema, there today in front of Parliament, just trying to find ways in how we can deal with this. But as much as he has spoken such words and remarks, the health minister, Aaron Motsoaledi, had something else to say, as he responded by saying that South Africa is not dependent on the US aid, especially for key health programs such as the HIV and AIDS program or treatments as well. So we are seeing that even as they are cutting ties with us as South Africa, we are still not as much as reliant to it, but it also looking at the fact of the geopolitics as well and the interrelations between South Africa and the US, putting it as well in the global scale, because Trump is at the point where he is definitely chucking everyone out at this point. I mean, even today cutting off not just only the energy just transition program funding for South Africa, but he also took out threats to Hamas, saying that he needs to also, to take out those that he have held captive as well, that have been held captive there, or else they will face the wrath of the US. And this is the 100 days of Trump being in office as well that is causing a lot of turmoil. On Tuesday, we spoke with our African news correspondent, Sean Mwenge, as we were trying to find out some of the ways on how it is shaping the African continent. And we came to the realization that in some ways, Africa has to find a way to also stand on its own. Where does this leave South Africa is a question that I'm asking you. Is South Africa ready to stand on its stand firm on its stance as well, and in global leaders, and as well as in its own foreign policies, despite its economic implications as well? We know we're looking at the fact that a lot of aid are now coming out of that, and what happens in this case. So we definitely want to find out from you, is the cost too high if ever we step on our own? Definitely want to hear what are your thoughts and what are definitely your remarks, especially when it comes to this interrelationships that we are seeing between South Africa and the US, and the latest coming from the US Oval Office, that the US has also withdrawn which is another problem that we are seeing there. Cutting some of the facts and the point there that we are seeing coming onto that, they're cutting about 1 billion in potential commercial investment. I wonder, are we able to stand strong on this? We are still waiting to hear remarks from the Minister of Energy to also tell us how are we going to be focusing on. The Minister of Electricity and Energy, Cyril Ramaphosa, is definitely going to come in and also respond to us in terms of how we are going to deal with everything that is just energy transition program, even in South Africa. Right, let's move over to the other story that we are tracking for you at that is the big story. As you all know, that the Parliament is waiting for, and South Africa at large is waiting for the Finance Minister to table the budget speech for 2025. As you all know, that it was postponed, right, from the 19th of February. After weeks of uncertainty, Parliament has confirmed that the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will finally table the 2025 budget speech next week, Wednesday, which is the 12th of March. But the issue here is that South Africa's 2.8 trillion budget needs funding, and government is struggling to find solutions. As we all know, that it was also postponed in the sense that they were looking into the fact that there were going to be tax that was going to be increased, right? And some of the political parties who are part of the government of national unity are definitely saying that they're not going to be part of them increasing some taxes. As we know that there has been a lot of cabinet meetings that have been happening since the postponement of the budget speech that was supposed to take place on the 19th of February 2025. And we are seeing that the original proposed increase valued added tax to 17% sparked an outrage, forcing the government of national unity into emergency discussions. And that is now that we are seeing that now the political parties are trying to find ways, and Parliament is saying that they are confident that the finance minister will be able to table out the budget speech that was supposed to say, because remember the ANC was saying it wants to maintain social grants and increase infrastructure spending. The DA on the other hand was saying no to tax hikes and insists on cutting government spending instead, as well as the EFF was calling for radical transformation, pushing for higher tax on the wealthy and corporations. And it caused a whole lot of turmoil in Parliament. A lot of political parties, especially even in the oppositions, were not having it. They were just saying that the government is not ready to deal with certain things. This government of national unity, as some of the political parties are not referring it as the government of national unity, but a coalition government. That is what we are seeing. If you would remember some of the remarks that were said in Parliament on the day when it was postponed. Let's take a listen to it.
Crisis that this country is facing. This country has got no leadership. This is what we are facing. We are saying, if we say we have democracy, let democracy come and exercise itself here. This is the theater of politics. Let the Minister of Finance come and say whatever I wanted to say. If we are serious and if we are...
All right, that is some of the proceedings. That's what's happening there. That is from the MK party, Mzanele Mpangi, coming out there, just reiterating the fact that, the minister could have just stood there and just, reiterated some of the things, but it was postponed there due to the fact that there was a spike hike of the VAT that was there. But with elections coming, no political party obviously wants to, stay around or be seen as the one increasing tax, because people are going to be remembering that, oh my God, you increase tax. If we put you into power, that means that there's going to be more tax that are going to be increasing. And what does it mean for a basic South African, me and you? It means that there's going to be a less than you can afford, especially when it comes to the basket that you're already buying, because of there is going to be increased VAT prices that is going to be there. And as soon as this risk is going to be tabled and made sure that it is resolved, the Parliament says that they are confident that the Finance Minister is going to be standing on that podium next week, Wednesday, the 12th of March, to address the country on the plans of the Government of National Unity's first budget, which kind of took a delay there. The big question is, can the GNU find common ground, or will we see another postponement? Hopefully, let us not see another postponement, because definitely when we were speaking to our political analyst last week, Thursday, Tsepo Mazola, he mentioned that it won't be delaying some of the funding, but because of some of the aids and fundings begin in April for some of the government, so it might not be causing some tragic and some cutting and finances from the government of national unity. I wonder how you see it. I wonder what your thoughts around it, because it is shaping our country, and it's sparking a lot of conversation around the fact that we do not have yet a plan, or when we say that we do not have yet a way forward when it comes to finances in the next fiscal year, the 2025-2026 budget that was supposed to be tabled, and what are the plans for us as the government of national unity and as a country as a whole. Definitely, we are going to be trying to give you a wrap of that. Make sure that you tune in even next week. We are going to be giving you a post-analysis on Thursday, a post-analysis of the 2025 budget speech if it gets tabled. Right. You are up to date with the big stories that we are tracking for you today, and that is the stories that we have been tracking for you, right? We looked into the fact that there is the budget speech that is going to be tabled next week, and will it still be postponed or will it still continue? And then again, the fact that President Cyril Ramaphosa saying that he doesn't understand why is the city of Johannesburg so dirty, but who are we to blame at this? Are we blaming the mayor, the premier, or the national government? Who is to blame in the city being like this? And in his remarks, he definitely said in his speech that he wants to make sure that we do. He said that to the premier, Banyaza Lucifi, make sure that we don't regret to make Johannesburg the host for the G20 Summit. And my question comes back again to saying that, are we doing this only because of it's the G20? If the G20 didn't come, that means the city of Johannesburg's ill management, malfunctions of potholes, the lights are not working, traffic lights not working, will not be dealt with if it wasn't for the G20. As well as we also looked at the fact that Julius Malema took a stance and making sure that Trump, as he cut aid, in the fact that he won't be aiding much parts of our country. And the recent one that came out this afternoon was that they also withdrawing from South Africa's Just Energy Transition Program, cutting about $1 billion potential commercial investments. I wonder, what does that mean? The Minister of Health, Aaron Mzwaledi, says that even when they are cutting this HIV and AIDS funding program, we are still not only depending on it, but are we really not in need of this? Is South Africa able to stand on a stand alone without the US? That is the big question. Can we do that? Can we resolve it? It's a big question that we are also asking you on today's table right here on The News Desk. Go on to all our social media platforms using the hashtag The News Desk. You can find us at Television 360. That's where the conversation is. And don't forget that today's episode will also be airing on Spotify tomorrow after all the proceedings here has been recorded and being made well for you, so that you can listen to it on the go for that, right? Plenty on the go for you still to come. We are going to be looking into the fact that there has been a whole lot of student protests that we are seeing. And can you imagine 2025, we are still speaking about student protests as a country, and that is what we are seeing in our country even today, that we are seeing that there is still a problem. And I'm going to be joined by Luyolo, who is a youth activist from he's an activist rather from AYV, which is an organization that focuses on making sure that they're amplifying young people's voices, and he's going to be sharing his point of view in the point of view segment as we try to make sense of it all in the political view. Without wasting time, I think let's step right into it. It's time now for the point of view. It's that time of the point of view, and definitely this evening we are shifting focus onto what has been happening with student protests. A lot of student protests that have been happening. I can't imagine and I can't believe that we are still talking about student protests even in 2025. Seeing a lot of student protests happening in the country, fees, registration, NSFAS delay. These have become some of the recurring struggles that we are seeing, and we are seeing with the latest protests, the Western Cape and the Wits universities coming out. Some of the students, they're protesting because they still haven't had housing, they still haven't had other fees that other registration fees that were supposed to be there, and that is what we are seeing. And definitely, to break it all down, I'm going to be joined by Luyolo as we try to make sense of it all. But before he joins me in, there has been a whole lot of these protests that are sweeping these campuses. I definitely want to hear from you. Definitely, please use that comment section there as we engage in this conversation, as we try to make sense of it all here on the news desk, because these protests, they're still happening. Is the fight still fair even in 2025? Or are we still going to be seeing some of these protests happening in our country? And definitely some of the reports that are coming out in some of the University of Cape Town students have some of these reports to say. Let's listen in.
The most we received at that time was that the conversation was noted, which obviously means that whatever outcomes we were going to get are subjective to whatever decision they take. So then the students of the University of Cape Town therefore decided to continue with their academic boycott, because the fundamentals of why we went to go submit that memorandum was, while we are still in the process of negotiations, process cannot continue because some people don't have access to process. But the word we have today is there is a scheduled executive meeting along with the SRC, that is an emergency meeting that is set for today in the afternoon.
All right, that is some of the students. They're protesting outside of the UC. I am joined by Luyolo Makaka, who is from Amplifying Youth Voices. He's joining me to kind of, try to make sense of this. This is an organization that is dedicated to amplifying or empowering young people and shaping conversation that drive change, as he is also passionate about driven individuals and committed to excellence that with continuous learning, and also known for a proactive approach to problem solving. Luyolo joins me to try to make sense of this all as we try to get a hold of him. I wonder, what are your thoughts around this conversation that we are having? Is it fair that even in 2025 we are seeing that young people are being excluded in some of these because they cannot pay fees? Is that the fact that that we are seeing? That is the problem that is being raised here, and that is the challenge that we are seeing. The fact that a whole lot of people are still going out there and they are still protesting. I mean, why are we still seeing this? I mean, this is something that has been happening since 2015, October 2015. We saw students coming out in the streets, making sure that they are fighting for their education, they are fighting for their their rights. And the fact that it is Human Rights Month and we are still seeing this happening, I wonder what are your thoughts around it? How are you shaping this? How are you viewing it as an individual to saying that? Have you been affected? Were you one of the students that have been affected by this? Seeing the fact that there are still NSFAS challenges that we are seeing, registration delays, fees delays that we are seeing, a whole lot of delays that are happening even in 2025. Is this a problem? Is what should change actually? Is it a challenge in leadership? Is it a challenge in these organizations that are offering that are offering financial aid? Because even with NSFAS, I mean, there has been incidences that we are seeing that students will be accepted at universities, they'll be accepted even at RAISE, but they cannot pay for the RAISE. That the NSFAS has also issued a whole lot of statements coming out to say that they will pay by the end of this month and all that. Are we not sure of the number of students that come in every year? Are we not able to see or account for the students that we can account for in each of every year? Because learners are applying, number one. There's a portal, there's an opening date, there's a closing date, but we are still seeing a challenge that even if there is that registration challenge, that there is the people registering, there are still people cannot be accounted for. It's as if we do not know that there is going to be 500 students who are going to be going to varsity and 500 students that we have accepted to give funding to, that we are seeing that now that the same students that they cannot afford registration, but you see the fact that the NSFAS has accepted. Again, we are shaping pointing the finger to the varsities, to saying that varsities, you are seeing that these students have been accepted by the NSFAS, but we are still saying that you are not accepting them to because of registration. Is that a problem for them? So these are the challenges that students are facing even now, and it's still a challenge and it's still a problem that we are seeing. Even today, we are seeing that a whole lot of students are fighting their way and they are boycotting their way into the education system, and which is a challenge and which is a problem. I'm trying to get a hold of our guests, and as we try to dissect and try to make sense of this, because it's a big issue that is affecting a whole lot of young people in our country, and we seeing the fact that young people still cannot be able to go to varsity because of certain things that leadership and governance could have helped to limit what we are seeing, that students at universities are seeing this wrench again. Year in, year out, these students are seeing this problem as a difficulty. There is some of some of the voices and some of the concerns that have been raised on the ground. Let's try to listen in.
That annually each and every university must find itself in a position where it has to protest annually, whereas there is a way in which we can mitigate most of these factors. So I do believe that as much as they can deploy a task team to the University of Cape Town to look into the policies of the University of Cape Town, it is equally essential to deploy a task team to look into the policies of NSFAS, because those are the fundamentals of our issues here, to look into the policies of what is ought to be done with the missing middle, because a vast majority of our students fall within that category, right? Then furthermore, look into how do we then maintain institutional autonomy, but then what control do the ministers have over fee and fee increases? Because a university has its own council.
Right. That is some of the voices on the ground, the students there. I'm just reiterating the fact that year in, year out, this is what we are seeing. And I mean, we have been seeing this year in, year out. We are seeing students going into university and they are protesting, right? And they are protesting for their education. And now that these organizations are still causing a problem, is still causing a challenge that we are seeing, it still becomes a problem for everyone that young people, even in 2025, are still finding themselves without ways of trying to go into varsity. And I mean, the academic year has already started. I mean, they should be focusing on assignments now. They should be focusing on the academic year, looking into how are they going to function throughout the year. But we are still seeing students going out there and fighting for their education even in 2025. What is your thoughts? I want to hear what are your thoughts, right? What are your sentiments around this? That we are still grappling with student protests even in 2025. I mean, it's a challenge, right? It is a problem. I'm trying to get a hold of Luyolo, as he is going to also he is a youth activist, and he is going to try to help us make sense and try to break down this whole protest that we are seeing, that the fight still continues even in 2025. And is this fight free and fair, or is it still the leadership crisis that we are seeing even in our country? What are your thoughts? Let me know. Drop your comments there on the comment section as we await to try to make sense of it all together and the recent developments has to be the fact that there are ways and triggers and that might have done pushed to this. Remember, there have been deaths and there have been a lot of things that happened even in 2015 when this fees must fall that started, and we definitely going to try to make sense of it all, that we do not find ourselves that even in some of the placards that these students were having, is that is a student's death needed, right, for them to make their point, for them to make their point heard. I see Luyolo says he's here. I've sent a request for you to accept to join in the live. Please accept it so that you can join in the live, so that we can be able to have this conversation. And I'm not only having this conversation with you, Luyolo, guys. I'm having this conversation with also you. Want to hear, what are your thoughts on this? Do we need to see more accountability? Do we need to see more leadership changes? What is it that we need to see to make sure that there is a difference? There is we do not see 2026 again, that before the beginning of the academic year we are going to be seeing students protesting again outside universities and trying to make a lot of things, because a lot of universities have been coming out, and a lot of universities have been raising the fact that they definitely need to raise sharp voices. This University of Cape Town, I mean the Wits University as well. We also saw even the University of Northwest itself also taking out the first that they interrupted the first day of the academic year themselves, and they definitely I would also cut down the first year to saying that some students are excluded, some students are here, some students are not part of the academic year that they are focusing on, that they should be learning into, and that is what needed to happen. And some of the students shared their remarks and shared their reactions onto definitely why they interrupted these the academic year of 2025 at the Northwest at the Nelson Mandela Bay University, rather.
One of the SRC president of Nelson Mandela University. I think this was the last resort that we find ourselves in. We had various engagements that led us up to this decision, because we said this is SRC of the year 2025. Let's start the year by having engagements, because these are annual issues. They're not new issues, they're issues that constantly happen each and every year. And the best way was to approach them by engaging various departments within the university to ask and understand their plan, propose what we have as the SRC and how best we can agree on how the academic year must operate. Further to that, we've been sitting in meetings, writing emails, exhausted all channels of communication, exhausted all ways to communicate and try to make our voice heard. But unfortunately, we find ourselves here because our voice was not really taken seriously and we're not heard. And this was
Right, that is some of the remarks that we are hearing from students protesting even in 2025 for education. And as I did promise that Luyolo is going to be joining me from Amplifying Youth Voices, an organization that is dedicated to empowering young people's voices. Luyolo, very good evening to you. Welcome to the news desk.
Evening, sir. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks, and you, sir.
I'm also fine.
All right.
Thanks.
It's not pleasant moments that we are having this discussion in. I mean, let's start with the big picture. We have seen protests before, right? The fees must fall happened in 2015 October, and we've seen that there was death there. And even in 2025, which is 10 years now, we are seeing that there are still protests and there are still learners, rather students who are out there in universities and protesting. Is there difference, or are we ever going to see change?
I would like to start by greeting the viewers at home, and also thank television for providing such a platform for us. Today I will try and I will attempt to answer the question beforehand, or the question which we are faced with is that is the spike in student protests in 2025 a result of the neglect of our government, or is it a result of a vacuum in leadership? So we as AYV, I will start by sharing our aim as an organization. Our main aim is to mobilize, educate, and empower young people through creating platforms such as these where young people get to engage. So let us start by identifying the problems. In South Africa, we are faced with an issue whereby our government has neglected us since the dawn of democracy, where education is concerned. So we as AYV are asking ourselves, how do we then remedy this, or what solutions are in place for us to try and counter what is happening? I think I will delve deeper into the topic as we proceed.
Very interesting developments that I love that you guys want to amplify those voices. And as you are amplifying young people's voices, I want to hear, what is your voice saying in the fact that this is a challenge that we are seeing, that even in 2025, we are seeing students protesting, for education?
We as AYV are calling for a more proactive approach from our government instead of the current reactive approach. Student protests are becoming a norm in South Africa. So we must find solutions which will do away with the current crisis which we are facing. Students are complaining about rising tuition fees, inadequate accommodation, inadequate private accommodation. They are also complaining about the crumbling state of their campuses. Now, we as AYV are pleading with our government to please provide a solution-based, solution-driven leadership for the problems we are faced. We are calling for a fully subsidized education system with a clear funding, which will also accommodate the missing middle students, which have previously been left out of available funding systems. We are calling for that. We are calling for a youth education council where people like us who are in institutions of higher learning will be involved in the policy drafting and the decision makings which will shape the policies of their institutions. We are also calling for our institutions of higher learning to do away with their current approach to education, of which it's the business approach. They are prioritizing collecting revenue instead of providing us with our basic human rights, of which is the access to quality and affordable education.
As I'm hearing what you guys are calling out for, and it raises a question in my head to saying that, Luyolo, who are we blaming here? Who is failing our students? Is it NSFAS? Is it the government? Or is this university management at this point? Because we find ourselves at the same point every year.
The answer to that question, it's a very simple one. It's all a result of government neglect. If we can be able to hold our government accountable, if we can be able to hold our government accountable, how can we hold our government accountable? We need to introduce new policies which are friendly to the poor people, to the underprivileged students. So if we can be able to introduce those policies, we can do away with the previous ones. I hope you understood me there.
Yeah, definitely. That there
But
needs to be policies, that definitely are run to making sure that we do not find ourselves in this situation as a country and as students, because definitely students don't need to be interrupted, especially in the academic year. I mean, so in the processes that you're talking about, how can we as young people hold rather the government accountable?
the best way we can hold our government accountable for the time being is by exercising our democratic right, of which it is to be able to vote. By that, we will be ensuring that we put people in place who will take care and who will look for the needs of students.
Definitely be taking care for the needs of the students, because the government needs to come into place in making sure that there's action that needs to be taken place. But how do we find balance? What there's policies that needs to be run, yes, but how can the as well as societies, the government, the private sector as well, find balance into this?
Oh, okay. Let us start with the government. Ne?
Mm-hmm.
So what the government can do is start by taxing the rich to fund the poor.
Yeah.
You tax the rich to fund the poor, thereby you are breaching the gap. Ne? So secondly, we are calling for a youth council whereby students will be part and parcel, which will be inclusive of students. Students will form part of that council, which will make and draft new policies which pertain to financial aid, accommodation, and how institutions are run. Students must not be left out of the decision-making process, because the decisions which are taken by politicians later affect the students which were not part of the decision-making process. So we're advocating for students to be involved in the decision-making process at a governmental level and at an institutional level also.
And nothing has been done that is as much as involving young people, right? We are seeing even in the cabinet itself, the national government itself, that young people's voices are not being amplified as much. And how important it is for, the government to include young people's voices.
It is very important for the government to include the youth in all of its programs, because we are essentially the future of this country. We are the ones with new and bright ideas which can shape and take this country forward. It is evident from the recent protests which we are seeing throughout the country that the current system which is in place is indeed failing us. It is therefore that we as AYV are advocating for the inclusion of young people in governmental structures so that they can shape our future with our own solutions.
Definitely. And the solution that was supposed to be shaping the community was the financial aid, which was NSFAS. What are your thoughts around this financial aid scheme that we have been seeing that it has been failing to, meet the demands and the needs of students completing their studies?
Okay. Um, I think the failures of NSFAS are a result of the failures of government itself, because whoever is in charge of NSFAS is deployed by the government. So if we could introduce a new funding model, a new funding model that accommodates everyone, especially the poor, a progressive type of funding, which will tax the top 1% of South Africans who have 50% of the country's wealth. Those people should be able to give back to our country. We're also calling for the reform of the NSFAS board. We are calling for an inclusion of proactive board members who will offer proactive solutions instead of reacting to protest. Rather, have people who are competent occupying those positions, people who will do their job, people who will provide solutions during the year, not only try and act when they see tires burning on the streets.
Which is a true sense that's the only reaction, because
And sorry, lastly, we are also advocating for performance-based bonuses from the public sector side. Public servants should only get performance bonuses when they have reached a certain level of their work, when they've completed a certain amount of their work. It is unfair to us people who want services from them. They get paid for doing nothing. For instance, NSFAS is having a backlog of students. About 936 students applied for funding last year. Only 668,000 got provisionally accepted for funding, leaving the plus minus. So if we had competent and professional individuals in the NSFAS offices during the 2023-2024 financial year, we wouldn't find ourselves in this problem at this point. It is therefore that we are calling for the government to introduce this performance-based bonus type of salary to try and hold their own staff accountable.
Definitely, and you're raising a very interesting point to saying that there's an unfairness that we are seeing here, that even the students are not getting their education straight. They are sleeping in libraries, whereas public servants as well are at the crux of this thing. What needs to happen as we wrap up our conversation to end this cycle of protests? Because that's the only way that I'm seeing that the South African government is reacting to problems, that they will react only when they see a tire. Because I was about to ask you to say, is there any other different thing that we can do rather than protesting,
Unfortunately for now, protesting is the only language our politicians understand. So it's not like we do not use the other means or other channels available to us to try and communicate as students. We do use them up until the point of exhaustion. Now, when we have exhausted those means of communication, it is then that we decide, let us go on the streets. Maybe then our voices will be heard. But until such a time where we have a seat on the table where decisions are made, we will have no option but to go to the streets.
Streets it is. Hopefully that we do not find ourselves in this situation even in 2026. I don't know your thoughts. Do you think that are we going to find ourselves again in this cycle even in 2026 as the academic year starts then?
I'm hopeful that the situation will change, because for the past 25 years we've been governed by one party. But under this new government of national unity, I'm hoping that since there's an inclusion of other political parties who have been advocating for some of the things we are advocating for now, we hope that they will implement those policies now that they are part and parcel of government.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your time. That is Luyolo. Thank you so much for sharing such insights and actually amplifying the voices of the youth. In making sure that, there's demands and policies, as you were saying, that needs to be governed, and making sure that there's changes in leadership as well. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. That is Luyolo, who is an youth activist from the Amplifying Youth Voices, AYV, as they are amplifying young people's voices there. Luyolo, there's a big X at the corner of your screen there. You can just click on it, and then it will just help you to exit the live. To those who are tuning in, please don't forget to go to our Spotify tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. as this episode and this discussion that we just had with Luyolo and everything that we've talked about this evening will be there, as we are going to be continuing the conversation, and it will also be posted on our feed. So if ever you want to engage with this conversation, you can definitely go through there on all our social media platforms. platforms. And with that said, that is how we wrap up the Thursday edition of the News Desk and the week's edition of the News Desk. Conversation that have been informing, impacting, and inspiring you throughout the weekend. We are back again on Tuesday with another insightful conversation that is impacting and shaping our communities. Don't forget that as we be back on Tuesday, we are going to be bringing you a conversation around something that is World Obesity Day. We are going to be having a representative that is going to try to break us down as we try to make sense of this obesity as a country together. Go through all our social media platforms. You'll find us there at Television 360. That's where you will find us using the hashtag The News Desk. Right? Thank you so much. Until we meet again, look after yourself, stay informed, stay well, and have yourselves a magic weekend ahead. Good night.